Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar tonight on voice, and Kelly's going to be talking about the author's voice and I'm going to be talking about character voices.
All right. Hi everyone, thanks Mira. I'm so glad to be talking to you guys about voice today. I think voice is one of those things that can be sort of mysterious and elusive. It's very common to hear about a rejection based on the fact that, the editor just didn't connect with the voice. But it's sort of hard to know where to go from there in terms of improving your work, which is really frustrating. So it's good that we'll be able to talk about it a little bit, hopefully clear some of that mystery up. So voice is really what makes your book yours, It's that intangible quality that means that this story can only be told by you in this way and no one else. And just as I couldn't teach you how to be you, I can't teach you how to make your voice your own. But what I can do is explore what exactly this nebulous idea of voice is, and give you some pointers on how to find your voice, and give you some ideas on how to strengthen it so that it's as clear and compelling and strong as possible. So what is voice exactly? As I said, it's a little bit mysterious and hard to describe, but let's give it a go. Voice is what gives a story a personality, even when a character isn't speaking. Your writer's voice imbues every aspect of her story, plot, character, and dialogue, and Mira's going to go into more detail about all that stuff next. But it's really throughout the entire story, not just related to characters. And voice often reflects the author's own personality, which is why the best stories are the stories that really come from the heart. Your voice is going to come a lot more naturally when you're telling those stories. And the best writers really make us feel like we know them already just from reading their stories. So that's what voice is. When you read a book, you read a story, and you just feel like you know that person, you know that storyteller. So let's look at a couple of examples of strong voice as we get started and see what you can pick up from the text that tells you something about the story, but also something about the author. We're going to start with sort of a kooky one that I love, which is also one of our prizes tonight, Space Dog by Minnie Gray. So I'll just read a little bit and you guys can follow along. It's the year 3043, and for as long as anyone on home planet can remember, space dogs, astrocats, and maustronauts have been sworn enemies. After all, that's the way it's always been. But there's no time for that now, because in the vast deeps of space, a small ship is zooming. At last, Space Dog is about to go home. It has been a long mission sorting out planetary problems in the Dairy Quadrant. So this is obviously a really funny book, but it also sort of retains the majestic qualities of any heroic story, and there's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek quality that communicates to readers that Minnie knows that it's a very outlandish concept, but we should trust her, just kind of hang on for the ride. She's really a master at balancing quirky humor with other aspects of tone, of showing that she really doesn't take herself too seriously, which is really, really a good quality to have for a children's books writer. Here is another example that's a little bit different, but shows a different type of personality through voice. It's Duncan the Story Dragon by Amanda Driscoll. Duncan the Dragon loves to read. When Duncan read a book, the story came to life, and his imagination caught fire. Unfortunately, so did his book. And I just want to finish a book, said Duncan. I need to know what happened. Do the pirates find treasure? Does the captain save the ship? Do aliens conquer the earth? And I want to read those two wonderful words, like the last sip of a chocolate milkshake. The end. So even though these first few pages of the book have a dragon, fire breath, pirates, aliens, and a lot of humor, Amanda's voice instantly, or kind of above anything else, lets you know that it's a very gentle story. And her art, I think, really echoes that too. It has such a soft quality that extends from her voice, or extends her voice from just beyond the text. So in both of these cases, the voice of the story really is a direct extension of the author's voice and how they communicate in their day-to-day life. This connection between your voice as a person and your voice as an author is going to come a lot more naturally if you write about something that you feel connected to. So you should really know why you're telling your story and why your readers want to hear it. Why is this story something that you and only you just simply have to tell and have to share with the world? So, at this stage, don't think about your audience or sales hooks or anything else. Just think about why you just have to tell this story, and that passion is going to help your voice shine. So when I say, why are you the person who just has to tell this story? What do you bring to it that no one else could? I don't mean a degree in child psychology or a PhD in children's literature, although those are the things which undoubtedly contribute to your voice. What you bring are all the minuscule parts of you that come together to create the place inside of you that wants to tell this story. And for kids' books, it's especially going to be about your experience as a child, as a sibling, as a parent, as an aunt or an uncle, as a grandparent, a teacher, a friend, and everything in between. Your unique experiences throughout life led you to where you are today, and they all contribute to your perspective and to the unique way that you can communicate this story. So again, I'm talking about your passion for telling this story. Your passion and enthusiasm for this story is what you bring to it most of all. And this is where your voice is going to come from. And your voice is going to be the thing that, once the story is done, will make others see why this is a story that not just needed to be told, but that you needed to be the one to tell. So on that note, here's another example of a story that I think kind of, it could have been told by anyone, but it works because it was in the exact right voice. It's Apes A Go-Go by Roman Milicic and illustrated by A. Richard Allen. Fun fact, they actually have been best friends since kindergarten, so I think that helps the illustrator voice and the author voice really work together in this case. So it's about a very tidy town that falls into disrepair. And at this part of the story, everything about the town is still perfect. Everything except for one flower, which had grown a little taller than the rest. Ah, that pesky flower, grumbled the town's persnickety mayor. Luckily, a passerby at that very moment heard the mayor's complaint. It was Fussy Great Ape. Why, all it needs is a little nudge, said Fussy Great Ape, who liked things just so. I can fix it, Mr. Mayor. And delicately he did. Unfortunately, he trampled the whole flower bed in the process. See what you've done, you fussy great ape, cried the irate mayor. Oops, Fussy Great Ape winced. But not to worry, I know just who can fix this. And before the mayor could say a word, Fussy Great Ape leaned back his head, pounded his chest, and yodeled, Pogo, Pogo, Apes A Go-Go, which is how great apes call one another. So there are a lot of little clues here that point to a great, unique voice, but I love that parenthetical at the end, because it's obviously not something that really needed to be said, I think including it really tells you a lot about the author. And you might be able to tell the author is also British, sort of the British voice here. So I just want to share one more part of this book quickly, which picks up after the apes have just about completely ruined the town, despite their best intentions. And who should turn up but Baking Great Ape? Well, now, dears, I'm sure I can fix this, smiled Baking Great Ape, for she had some experience in fixing disasters. Then she baked a huge cake and put a little piece in front of the mayor, who, through his tears, took a nibble. Mmm. And then a little more. Yum. All the townsfolk and all the great apes had a slice, too. Someone brought balloons. And, people really started to enjoy themselves. So this is a book that I edited and acquired, and the first time I read it, I immediately was drawn to it. But that line, people really started to enjoy themselves. That little piece of text was just part for me. I was just like, I have to have this book. I need it. There's just something about it that really brings everything together, shows the author's sense of humor, sort of tongue-in-cheekness, and just really sells the project and just that tiny, seemingly kind of like almost a throwaway line. And that is really what voice can do. That is what your voice has potential to do. So the most important thing you can do to find your voice is to trust yourself and write honestly. It sounds cheesy, but you should write from the heart. That's where your voice comes from, and that can't be forced or faked. If you have a story in your head, get it out on the page without thinking about length or pace, or even if the way your character's obstacles are overcome makes sense. All of that can be refined later. Once you've found your voice and put your story in it, you can worry about all that. And as you strengthen those other aspects of the story and you get to know your character and your story better, your voice is only going to become stronger along the way. So don't think about finding the perfect word or the perfect cadence just yet. If you write on a computer, you can try typing with your eyes closed so you don't get caught up in how it looks or how you think it should look. Just let it come naturally, and with practice, the rest is going to follow. Which leads me to the most important point, practice. Yes, this is the best way to find and refine your voice. Without a doubt, it's to practice. Shouldn't be a surprise. I think that's true with most things. So your voice is a part of you, but communicating it is something that will take practice. Write every day, even if it's just for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a whole manuscript. Don't assume that everything you write is going to be published or it's even going to be shown to people. Write for yourself. Because you enjoy it, right? I hope you do. That's why you're here, right? You like to write, and that's going to make this exercise fun. Maybe one day you will come back to one of these little doodles and turn it into something that you want to show someone. You never know when something you're doing as an exercise will be the one you want to pursue. I think that's why it's important to be as prolific as possible. And the more you practice, the more you create, the stronger your voice is going to be when you do find that story. So try writing something and then rewriting it in first person, second person, omniscient narrator, third person, different points of view, see how it changes as you change as a writer, developing more skills, practice writing in different styles, different genres, see what feels most natural and successful for you. See what you enjoy the most, but do it every day. And, I think that's one reason you see a lot of Tumblrs and blogs leading to book deals. Many of these people post something every day, not necessarily to get attention from publishers or even, people, but just to hold themselves to that standard of being on a public forum, being expected to produce, create every single day. And then by the time they've been doing it for a few months or years, their voice is really strong and clear and recognizable. So this is a really great exercise if you're not really sure, if you're having trouble kind of finding your voice. Talk to yourself, read what you've written out loud. The best writing sounds like speaking, and your picture book voice should feel natural when you hear it out loud. I think this is one reason or at least I think a lot of people have a sort of a knee-jerk reaction of ick when we hear people using text speak like LOL, OMG in real life. That's not how it's how people write, but it's not how people talk. There's a divide there. So, see how your written voice sounds when you recite it out loud. Record yourself on your phone or some other device. Try the exercise with a writing partner. Write down what the other person says out loud. How does your story change if you try to read it without looking at what you've written, just going by what you remember? Pay attention to those discrepancies between what you've written down and what you said out loud, because they're likely reflective of your natural voice. And I think this issue of written text reflecting natural spoken word is why so many editors are not fans of picture books that rhyme. Obviously, they can work, but I think a lot of people sort of start there, and it really strains your voice. When you're forcing yourself into a rhyme scheme, you're obscuring your natural voice, letting the cart drive the horse, kind of, So, of course, some people's natural voice does shine and rhyme, like Dr. Seuss, obviously, but those people are really the exception to the rule. And beyond just a rhyme scheme, voice loses its way when anything is forced. If you have to work too hard to make one of the pieces fit into the puzzle of your story, your voice is going to strain and it's going to show. It's kind of interesting, you think you're the only one who notices it, but it really does show to other people. You can tell when your voice is flowing and then there's a break in it. So write as you speak and it's going to flow more naturally. Don't try to sound like a writer. Definitely don't try to sound like other successful writers. If you try to sound like Mo Willems or Oliver Jeffers or John Klassen, it's going to sound forced. So read them and recognize how they're using their distinct voices to tell a story, and also honestly build a brand. That's how distinct their voices are. But when you write, just try to sound like yourself. So I want to show another great example of this, which is Anita Laval's 10 Hungry Rabbits. So it's a counting book, which doesn't seem like there would be a lot of room to show off voice. But I just love Anita because she's able to imbue her voice into any type. She does a lot of concept books, and they all sound like Anita. It's really impressive. So listen to these passages and observe how reflective they are of Anita. Graceful, delicate, sophisticated. The 9th rabbit saw 9 green peas in a pod. The 10th rabbit remembered the 10 black peppercorns in his pocket. And then later, once they have scattered all their ingredients, the rabbit family sat down to bowls of delicious vegetable soup. Yum! The happy rabbits were hungry no more. So this story could have easily ended. It could have easily been dry. It has the illustrations, it has the hooks of the counting concept. It has the vegetables, the colors. It could have easily ended with something dry, like they made their soup and enjoyed a nice dinner together. Gets the point across fine. But Anita's stories are always deceptively simple. They're concept books that are just told in a way that no one else could tell them. So another exercise that I think is good and kind of fun is to take an existing piece of text, something short that you can use. You can use a picture book, but it might be better to actually start with something drier, like a Wikipedia entry on your favorite singer or your hometown or an animal, something that you're already have some familiarity with, fairy tale or a fable or even a recipe. Take that piece of text and retell it. How would you convey that information? How would you tell the story of how to bake the perfect cookie for this little mouse? Tell this story and then walk away for a while. And when you come back, examine the flair and the personality that you brought to your telling next to the original text. So that's your voice. It's that easy. Oops, let's skip the page. So I'm going to do a quick example of that. I love sea creatures. I've really been fascinated by this one type of jellyfish. So here is the Wikipedia summary on this type of jellyfish, and I'm going to tell you what I know about the jellyfish, which contains a lot of the same information. I don't know if you guys knew this, but it is actually possible for some species to live to get forever. For this jellyfish species, they actually live forever. They're immortal jellyfish. which is kind of scary because they're jellyfish, but I think it's fascinating. It's a species of small jellyfish called the immortal jellyfish, which mostly live in the Mediterranean and around Japan. For most of their lives, they're just like normal jellyfish. But unlike most jellyfish, if they encounter physical danger or environmental stress, they can actually return to their state as a polyp or a newborn jellyfish, reattach to the seafloor and kind of, just like they did when they were first born, and kind of start their life all over. The process is called transdifferentiation, which means the cells are changing. In this case, changing in the way that they were when they were polyps. And theoretically, they could do this forever. They could go back to being babies, mature, encounter danger, and go, revert to that state again. Most don't do that, so it's not like the sea is going to be overcome with jellyfish. Well, actually it is, but that's due to other factors. They can survive in pollution and other factors that other sea creatures can't withstand. So that's a different story. Anyway, it won't be overcome with crazy immortal jellyfish, but just knowing that they have the potential to do that is something that I think is so amazing. So see how that's easy, right? It's definitely not the most scientifically complete telling, but that's because that's not one of my strengths. That's not a part of my voice. That's not something I bring to the table. But I hope I was able to convey my passion and a sense of wonder about the topic, because that's how I feel connected to it. And honestly, this is something that you probably already do on a regular basis. When you tell your friends what happened on your favorite TV show last night, or recount an eventful weekend to coworkers, all of these little moments that you probably don't think twice about that's your voice. You're using it every day. You tell stories. That's what you guys do. It's just a matter of sort of re-examining it, looking at it a little bit differently. So further to this, think about all the fairy tale retellings that you've seen out there, especially lately, such a hot thing to do right now. They aren't changing, these aren't popular because they're changing some vital aspect of the story so that people just have to read the book to find out, what's new and different about the Wicked Witch this time. They don't change that, They're successful because the author is retelling it in their own unique, captivating, unput-downable voice. When I was a kid, we spent every Christmas Eve with a family friend who collected Night Before Christmas retellings. So I have all these up here. And every year we would hear a different one. And you can see this is just a small sampling of them. And, The Night Before Christmas, it's not an exciting story. It's not, it's not the story that makes it exciting. It's the telling. Each of these tellings is captivating in its own way. And each story can be told in a limitless number of ways. That's why voice is so important, even more important than plot. And if you're curious, my favorite Night Before Christmas retelling is the Cajun version. So, editors can't tell you how to find your voice, but if they see and hear your voice in your story, and if they connect to it, everything else can be fixed. Everything else can be worked on together, can be strengthened. They can help you shape your story to preserve and even strengthen the voice together. Once you have that nugget, you can really go anywhere from there. So you guys all have stories to tell, or you wouldn't be here, and the more you strengthen your voices, the more successfully you're going to be able to tell them, which is really exciting. So I hope this helps. I hope you guys are ready to look for your voice. I'm going to turn it over to Mira, who will tell you about how to develop your character-specific voices.
Oh yeah, cool. So Kelly shared with you some great techniques for finding your writer's voice and how some authors' styles of writing or voice shines through in whatever they write. Many of the techniques that Kelly shared in her presentation also apply to creating your characters' voices. And here I'm using voice to apply to not only how your character speaks, but also how they act. First, I want to share examples of some of my favorite characters and talk about what gives them great voice. And then I'd like to share some specific writing tools and techniques related to creating character voices. So let's start with one of my favorites, Saving Sweetness by Diane Stanley. Have a listen to the voice in this dialogue. Now I've come to take you home, says I don't want to go home, says she. And then in these actions, I'm tired of scrubbing floors with a toothbrush. What can't be cured must be endured, I told her. Now I thought this was wise advice, but the orphan didn't seem to think so, 'cause she lit off like she was trying to catch yesterday. Part of what makes these voices memorable is their use of vernacular language set in the Wild West with words like scrubbing and 'cause she lit off like she was trying to catch yesterday. And the homey platitude, what can't be cured must be endured. Vernacular language is great for creating place-specific characters. So now imagine that this story was set in Boston or somewhere else. We'll go into this a little more later. But meanwhile, think about how your character's language and voice would change if it was set somewhere else, and just the subtleties of different places. Our next example comes from the very well-known author Eric Carle. No dialogue is also another way of having a strong voice. For example, in his book, "Slowly, slowly, slowly," said the sloth, we hear, "Slowly, slowly, slowly, a sloth crawled along a branch tree." Page turn. Slowly, 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 the sloth ate a leaf. With slow page turns, repetition, and short page text, the book slows the reader down so that we experience the sloth's character and experience him through his slow actions. The sloth doesn't say a word, even when, one by one, a slew of jungle animals ask him why he's so slow, so quiet, and so boring. Still, the sloth doesn't answer. The actions and lack of response tells us so much about the sloth's voice in his refusal to speak. He's a strong, determined animal who knows who he is and what's important to him. And then finally, when the jaguar asks him, "Why are you so lazy?" the sloth thinks and thinks and thinks for a long, long, long time. Note the rule of threes in each of Eric Carle's repetition. This also helps slow the story down. Sloth's voice is strong and consistent in his actions. Will it be the same in his speaking voice or dialogue now that he's finally broken his silence and the pattern in the story? Here's what he says in the gentle climax. "It is true that I am slow, quiet, and boring. I am lackadaisical, I dawdle and I dilly-dally. I am also unflappable, languid, stoic, impassive, sluggish, lethargic, placid, calm, mellow, laid back, and, well, slothful. I am relaxed and tranquil, and I like to live in peace, but I'm not lazy." Then the sloth yawned and said, "That's just how I am. I like to do things slowly, slowly, slowly." Is that not exquisite, slow, lyrical language that's totally congruent with who Sloth is? Another charming thing about this story is the way that it uses three different points of view. The third-person omniscient narrator sees all and describes the sloth's action. Third person usually uses he, she, or they. The other animals respond in second point of view, speaking to the sloth as you, directly. And then the beautiful climax where the sloth speaks in the first person using I statements. Each point of view has strengths and weaknesses, which unfortunately we don't have time to get into right now. But the point of view contributes to the voice of the character as well as the author's voice. Let's have another look at a very different book that also uses 3 points of view, but with a totally different author, illustrator, voices. Intrigued? I hope so. So who's ready for PowerPoint's equivalent to a page turner? A page turner is basically using specific techniques to build suspense so the reader has to turn the page and read on. Okay, you ready for the big reveal? We're really building that suspense.
We're ready.
Chloe and the Lion. Chloe and the Lion starts with super smart author Mac Barnett introducing himself using first-person point of view. "This is me. I'm Mac. This is me, Mac. I'm the author of the book." He then introduces the illustrator Adam Rex, and then he introduces the main character of the fictional story, Chloe. Adam shows Mac as this goofy, awkward 3D character, giving us a great sense of Mac as a character and his voice as a character. Note that Mac refers to himself as Mac rather than Mac Barnett, showing himself as friendly and informal. Mac, who clearly wants to be in the story, is breaking the fourth wall by letting the reader in on the fact that they all know that they are really in a book. This is called metafiction or meta-narrative. The story then moves into the fictional story of Chloe and the lion, which is told in the third person and continues on until the illustrator, Adam Rex, interrupts the narrator with his illustrator voice. That's right. Illustrators bring their own visual voice to the story and how they depict the characters, settings, what happens, and what they bring or include that the writer doesn't. In this case, Adam decides it should be a dragon rather than a lion. And here the conflict and drama begins, and it's hilarious. Different fonts are used for Mac and Adam in their speech bubbles and the story itself. Different phrasing and language is used by each character, especially Max, as his character gets progressively more frustrated and angry as Adam flexes his illustrator voice in how he depicts Mac throughout their argument. Much more happens that I don't want to get into because I want to leave time to actually teach some techniques. But I will share that even Chloe breaks the fourth wall by explaining that she asked Mac to draw the lion after Mac had fired Adam and another illustrator. The other illustrator has his own voice, of course, using phrasing like, "Look, buddy." This phrase gives him a somewhat confrontational, somewhat old-fashioned working class or no-nonsense feel. And even though the second illustrator is a very minor character, it's great that he has his own distinctive voice. There are so many books with wonderful character voices that I'd love to share with you, but I'm just going to share this excerpt from the great Barbara Botner's Wallace's List, which she co-authored with her husband, Gerald Kruglich. There are two contrasting characters in the story. Wallace, who tries to control his world by making lists and sticking to them, and the free-spirited Albert. Here's a short snippet after Wallace meets Albert and can't respond because it's not on his list. Now here's Barbara and her characters' voices. The next to-do list Wallace wrote read, 1. Say hello to Albert. 2. Laundry. So Wallace introduces himself to his neighbour. Would you like to listen to some music? Asked Albert. I have to do my laundry, Wallace explained. Laundry is laundry, said Albert, but music is life. Is that not a beautiful example of creating contrasting characters with exquisite voice? Now I want to break it down a little into some techniques for writing great characters' voices. First of all, you need to know your characters really well before you can hear them. Now, I'm not telling you to become mentally unwell and hear voices, but I am telling you to do this a little. In my opinion, the best way to write your character's voice, which is really their personality, is to inhabit them in the way an actor inhabits a role, but to do it your way, the way that Ryan Gosling and Johnny Depp would each inhabit the same role very differently, according to each of their personalities. You need to find out who your characters are, what they want, how they move, and how they sound. A couple of weeks ago, I wrote an article about writing strong characters with a character map right here. And here's the template I made for folks to use with their own characters. I'll include it with the recording link that I send you guys. There are many ways to suss out your character's personality. Are they an introvert, an extrovert, intuitive, emotional, snarky, critical, defiant, loving, affectionate, suspicious, competitive, funny, serious, or anxious, among others? The Emotion Thesaurus is a wonderful resource to help you narrow down your character's personality traits for a character with a strong voice. Another way to develop your characters is to use models or archetypes. With models, think about who your character might resemble. Imagine a perky, cute, but sometimes obnoxious character modeled after Adam Levine. Watch an episode of The Voice and write down everything that he says and any actions he takes, and then translate them into a kid character. See what you can steal, be inspired by, to infuse into your character. You don't want to plagiarize, but you do want to definitely get inspired. Now think about Audrey Tautou in the movie Amelie for a more introverted character. Raymond in Everybody Loves Raymond is also a good model for a complex character. Think about popular culture and who the characters are and how you can appropriate some of their traits and ways of speaking and acting to make and develop your own kids' character voices. Think about your friends and relatives or any quirky characters that you know and write down neat or weird things that they say. You never know when it might be perfect for one of your characters. Archetypes go way back, and if you want to see a brilliant use of them, check out the Harry Potter books that are full of archetypal characters from mythology and folklore. Once you've narrowed your personalities down, it's time to work on how your characters express themselves, both in terms of what they say, how they say it, and how their actions and bodies support what they say. Fortunately, the illustrator usually shows the body language. However, the author will sometimes include a written description to show rather than tell. For example, Joni's shoulders drooped. Would she ever get an A? Or alternatively, there may not be that description. Instead, there'll be an illustrator's note. Show Joni looking despondent. Though you might not need to include this particular note because they'll get it anyway from reading the rest of the text. You want to be very, and I did this here to show you the square brackets. That's how you do an illustrator note. But you want to be very frugal with these because some editors hate illustrator notes while others are fine with them. Next up, I'd like to talk about ways to make your characters' speaking voices, aka dialogue, more distinctive. So here they are, and I'm going to go into each of these briefly. Syntax or sentence structure is the way that you organize your words in a sentence. People from other countries or folks who may be a bit socially awkward will often have unusual syntax, such as, to school we go. And I'm someone that sometimes has weird syntax because I'm English as a second language person. While other writers will use unusual syntax for a cool creative writer's voice, like former student Deborah Underwood does in The Quiet Book. Another way is in sentence lengths, especially if you only have two characters. One character might speak in long-winded sentences that could be lyrical or frustrating. The other character might speak in short, staccato, or choppy sentences, like he or she has ADD, or short sentences that only provide minimal but important information. Sophie in Sophie Squash by Pat Zeitler-Miller and Ann Wilsdorf speaks this way in her denial, defiance, and determination to have, keep, and care for her squash. Listen to this after Sophie and her surrogate child / doll, Bernice, which is a squash, starts to go off. At story time, some kids pointed and stared. "What's that spotty thing?" a boy asked. "Her name is Bernice and she's a squash," Sophie said, "with freckles." Short and to the point. This girl knows she doesn't need to do much talking to be heard. Verbal tics or habits. When Mac Barnett's second illustrator says, "Look, buddy," it's a small moment for a minor character in the story. But if he had a bigger role in the story and also said things like, "Look, it's like this," and "Look, I don't want to go there," that's a verbal tic or verbal habit. Are there words your character can repeat as a verbal tic or habit? Maybe they mumble. Maybe they use metaphors. The kinds of words or language that your characters each use is also very important in developing character voice. Does your character use monosyllabic or multisyllabic words? Simple or fancy language? Does he or she use vernacular language like saving sweetness, dirty dog, and swamp angel? Make a list of places and cultures that have distinctive sayings and ways of saying things. Think about the different ways a Norwegian descent in St. Paul, Minnesota versus a hipster kid in San Francisco versus an African American kid in Philly versus an Eloise type kid in Manhattan. would describe themselves getting up in the morning or a day in their life. Now try this as a practice exercise with your own story. In terms of diversity, we need more diverse kids in children's literature, and not just as secondary characters, but as powerful main characters. And they have to be written right with sensitivity and great kid appeal. You especially need to be careful not to stereotype, particularly if you are writing about a racially different culture outside your own culture. One of the best ways to do that is by having your work vetted by a cultural insider, preferably someone in the education field. I'm not saying don't write outside your culture, but you need to do it very carefully. The last thing I want to share with you is one of my all-time favorite books that I consider one of the best books ever written in terms of voice, which is called appropriately Voices in the Park by Anthony Brown. It's a different kind of point of view story where an experience or episode is shared from 4 characters' very different points of view, with exquisite differentiation in each character's voice. I've shared this book before because I love it so much and because it makes such a great mentor text. I could do a whole webinar on this one book alone, and I love doing the accents. So, I hope you guys loved this. It was fun doing it, and bye for now.
Bye for now.